I think it was 80 plus Catholics in the House voted for it. Essentially, this apparently is going to enshrine in law same-sex marriage and more. To talk about this, we've invited Joshua Mercer from Catholic Vote on to be with us, and he joins us now by Zoom chat. Good morning to you, Mr. Mercer.
Hey, glad to be with you. Yeah, I mean, you're right. You know, the House already passed this deceptively named Respect for Marriage Act. Basically, it concretizes same-sex marriage ruling that the Supreme Court made a big mistake on back in 2015 in Obergefell. And what started all this was that Clarence Thomas made the point, which is true, that not only was Roe v. Wade wrongly decided the day it was decided, but so is this 2015 decision. And he said the court should revisit that, which sent a panic mode to every, sexual revolutionist to get this, try to pass this into law. And so the House passed it, and now it's on to the Senate. And it's a 50-50 Senate, right? 50 Republicans, 50 Democrats, tie-breaking vote. But we have a filibuster, and we've talked about this a lot before. You need 60 votes to pass this, because the minority can just keep debating it and block it and all that kind of stuff with the filibuster. Here's the problem. There's a lot of squishy Republicans who are actually just fine with totally redefining marriage at the federal level, which is a total mistake. I mean, it's a mistake anywhere you slice it, of course. As Catholics, we would say that. But there's at least 5 Republicans who've already said that they're totally okay with a complete federal takeover of marriage, redefined in this radical way. It's only been, 7 years since this was done by the Supreme Court, if you think about it, and it's unleashed all this LGBT stuff that we've seen recently. I mean, it goes beyond the marriage debate and to touch every part of human life. I mean, why is it that we have a federal government now that's trying to force children to be castrated, and all the radical stuff we're seeing in the LGBT movement now? But obviously Catholics have our work cut out for us. We have to remind people it's not just to declare every coupling to be equal. I mean, as Catholics, we understand, and everyone should understand, common sense. Male and female is the only coupling that will generate new human life. And that's why it's unique. To call it equal with everything else is a farce and an injustice.
Let me reiterate, 80 plus Catholics in the House voted for this bill. I find that incredibly troubling.
Democrats, Catholic Republicans, a lot of Catholic Republicans too.
Yeah,
we call them out.
And something I've said repeatedly on this show is, as Catholics, we should not break down based on party affiliate, right? Republican or Democrat or conservative, liberal, what have you. It's the faith. We believe in the Catholic faith, and let the chips fall where they may. So it is not surprising to me, given all the other difficulties we face in the Catholic Church today, that 80 Catholics decided that they were going to supplant society as a whole by destroying the very foundation and fabric of society, which is marriage between a man and a woman. It boggles the mind why they would make such a choice, but nonetheless, they have. And yet, so let's look at it just the Republicans. So many Catholics that I know give themselves over to the Republican Party and say, look, we got to be Republicans because, the Democrats, they got all these bad stuff. Well, exactly what is the Republican Party conserving at all these days?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, 60 plus percentage of Republican voters aren't even with us on this. And so we have our work cut out for us. I mean, the fact is, the country has drifted very far in this. We have to do exactly what we did with Roe v. Wade. It may take a while. We have to re-educate people on the uniqueness of the man-woman marriage. It's the only thing. I mean, everything else is not a marriage, obviously. Just a marriage is between a man and woman. That's going to take a while to re-educate people, and so we're going to continue to fight in the short term to try to stop this horrible bill. But we have the long work ahead of us. I mean, today is the feast day of St. Anne Joachim. I mean, just get inspired by holy marriages to fight for this kind of stuff and to re-educate people about the uniqueness. The reason government is involved in marriage, right? We have a big libertarian streak in our country sometimes. Why is government even involved in this? Obviously, the government is involved in this. This is so fundamental. Why? Because marriage actually predates the government, and the government realizes this is very important. Man and a woman, we need to make sure that these couplings, which generate new human life, I mean, children come out of the womb. It's not like they're 20-year-old voters. I mean, they need a mom and a dad to raise them, to educate them. It's in all of our interests to make sure that we have, as many people as possible raised by their mom and their dad. And this is very unique, what marriage is, and we cannot forget it. So we have to keep fighting for it.
Yeah, it's the natural order. Thank you for your time, Mr. Mercer. If you don't know the CatholicVote.org, I suggest you check out their website. I want to talk about the naming of this bill. It's so deceptive, as you mentioned. They call it the Respect for Marriage Bill, and I'm just wondering what your take is on, a lot of these crazy things that get passed. They try to manipulate the language, right? So you think respect for marriage, of course, that's a good thing, right? And so people get swept away with that. And you see leftists saying, for example, love is love. And, these slogans, they come up and kind of rally people. They think, oh, okay, well, yeah, that is a good thing. How do you think that that people receive these sorts of messages, these sorts of names, these conventions, and go along with it?
It's so perfect you said that. Tucker Carlson gave a speech in Iowa, and actually not about marriage, it was about beauty. But he made the same kind of point that what happens is, people use language to deceive others, and we have to get back to the basics. And if you remember, he even said in the Bible, first there was the Word. Everything flows after that. We are made in the image of God, and of course, language has this immense power. That's why it has power, because God is the Word, and so using words, again, when you're in a battle, the first thing that happens is people enlist the use of language to try to manipulate things. Like they say, war, the first casualty is the truth. I mean, this is exactly what's going on. This is a spiritual battle. The first casualty here is the truth. Like, it is so obvious, like the whole debate, they call it marriage equality. It's not equal. A male and a female is the only coupling that generates new human life. To call anything equal to that, which is totally unique, is a farce. It's an injustice. So you're right. We have to keep fighting. Absolutely. If you go to CatholicVote.org, we have information about this bill. You can look at it. You can sign up. You can contact your members of Congress, especially people who are in states that it's going to make a difference. I mean, if you're in North Carolina, some of these states Ohio, where the senators are kind of wavering, we could really use some help.
Some 47 Republicans voted for it. 80 plus Catholics voted for it, and it would enshrine as law of the land same-sex marriage, because Justice Clarence Thomas in the Dobbs v. Jackson decision came out and said, listen, we made bad decisions based on Roe v. Wade, and we now need to fix those. We're doing it with Dobbs, but we need to look at some of these other decisions like Obergefell, where we also made similarly bad decisions, and they need to be corrected for justice sake. And that got the left pretty worked up. And then, of course, they're now trying to say, all right, well, we're going to pass legislation to ensure, to codify, so that the Supreme Court can't take that away. Mr. Mercer, welcome back to the show. I feel like the left was doing this as messaging, right? Just to signal to their base, hey, we care about this issue, and so this is our messaging to our base. Did they expect that the Senate would be like, oh, no, we can get this done?
I think they thought they probably only had like a 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 chance. It turns out that you're right, that it's got a better chance of succeeding than they initially thought. The Democratic Party has had such a horrible year, from gas prices, inflation, and all this other stuff, Afghanistan withdrawal from a year ago. They needed a win, and this has turned out to be a surprising political win for them in a year that's been very difficult. I mean, for them and their base, to see Roe v. Wade overturned is just terrible for them. And so they're looking at this like, wow, this is an opportunity for us to make our base, you're right, happy. But, we got to fight on this. We got to fight this.
Yeah. I mean, it's surprising to me to see so many Republicans support this, to be sure. We discussed that last segment. But this bill has more to do than just, marriage between a man and a woman or same-sex couples. It in fact, goes into a much more perverse direction, doesn't it?
Right. I mean, obviously the bill, first of all, repeals the Defense of Marriage Act, which the Supreme Court had already overturned, but it formally repeals that, which is a frustration. But the bigger problem is it basically says every state has to recognize marriage if it's been recognized in another state, right? That's their way of saying it. But the problem with it is, right now, what happens if California decides to go a little bit more crazy? What if they allow multiple husbands or multiple wives, polygamy? Yeah. And then that couple moves to, well, not couple, gosh, that was 4 people, let's say, move to Texas. And then as you say, hey, Texas, this was called a marriage in California. Because of this new law, quote unquote, you have to recognize this as a marriage. So you start running into all sorts of problems. It's like, why limit it to 2? The principle is still the same, they would say. So that's, that becomes a real hornet's nest, and I think that causes all sorts of problems.
I actually disagree a little bit in the sense that I think that we actually went all the way radical and now we're backtracking. And the reason I say that is because societies throughout history of mankind have always had marriage between a man and a woman. Now, there were cultures where it had a man and multiple women, and allegedly, according to some modern scholars, there have been relationships between one woman and multiple men where there was marriages in that way. Concubines have always been a thing. These kind of natural sins or natural marriages between several people were always a thing. Polygamy has been a thing throughout society, and it was the Christianity that crushed that and made it between one man and one woman. But sodomy, while it's always being a sin and practiced throughout different cultures, it was never considered marriage because it was understood that it was not fruitful. It was sterile, as you mentioned earlier. So I think that going backwards and trying to make things, put polygamy in, is actually less radical than what we have already done by making gay marriage legal. What do you think about that?
Well, that's certainly, I can understand your point there. Obviously, they're both different kinds of sins. I see what you're saying. Incidentally, with regards to polygamy, to kind of go around your question a little bit, Utah had a lot of polygamy because there's a lot of Mormons, and they wanted to be admitted into this union. And people from other states are like, well, hold on a second. We want to make sure that you're not going to, enshrine this into law. And so that was made quite clear to Utah that they had to make sure marriage was only between a man and a woman before they became into our union. So again, this is why this is so important, because, if you're married in Minnesota and you go to Texas, this is what our country's about. Like, the marriage should be, you're still married, full faith and credit. So that's why, we're having to deal with some of these issues and questions. Now, I got another problem I have with this bill. The reason I have a real big problem with this bill is the religious freedom implications. Now, some of you might remember this, but Bob Jones University had a fight with the federal government back in the early 1980s. And it was, they had some views that Catholics were really, they don't like Catholics, by the way, but they really thought interracial, couplings was just totally bizarre. And most people think that's really kind of crazy. Well, the Supreme Court cited fundamental national policy as a reason to remove their tax exempt status, because they were totally going against the Civil Rights Act and all that other kind of stuff, right? And that's what the Supreme Court used to justify that decision. Well, if this becomes law, right, what will happen to other religious schools that just believe in natural marriage and don't recognize other kind of stuff? Do they run the risk of losing their tax exempt status? Do we run the risk of the federal government coming in and saying, you have no right to act like this, your organization, your charity, your school? So I think there are monstrous,
or even worse, Catholic Church, you must marry this quadruple couple. You must, right. you have to, because it's the law of the land. And if you don't, you could, like in Canada, you could be dragged before a tribunal, and who knows what will happen then. Or your tax exempt status will be removed, and golly gee whiz. It just goes on and on. But I would say if polygamy becomes the loophole, sodomy is bad enough, and then you get polygamy, notwithstanding Adrian's comments a minute ago, well, what's going to stop someone going, well, college you is, I'm married to my dog, and you must recognize that.
I mean, again, it's probably easier for these courts to kind of get creative when it comes to the set number of persons in a marriage. I don't know if they would be willing to make that leap, but well, again, the things we thought were unheard of or impossible just 8 years ago have become possible.
Or
the age limit is my concern.
What about marrying the man-boy love community? By the way, there was a report of 2 children receiving monkeypox because they were in a community of this cabal, this homosexual sodomy cabal. Pray for those children because that's a pretty serious thing. But the man-boy love organization would love to be able to marry children.
When it comes to sexual revolution, though, the real victims are almost always the children.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that people need to remember. It's like, people think, oh, we just want to do X or Y because it's a lot of fun or whatever. And it's like, it ends up happening is that kids get caught in the crosshair. They end up being the victims that, broken homes, or in some cases, obviously much worse. We all have an incentive to try to fight again and strong for what marriage is intended. And it's the thing is, like, it's not even, obviously it's a Catholic thing because it's a truth thing, but it goes, you don't have to be Catholic to recognize the truth of marriage as the unique pairing of a man and woman to create new human life. It has transcended denominations and generations, civilizations. It predates all governments. It's the most natural thing, and it needs to be defended, especially when it's under attack.
Yeah.
We as Catholics especially are called to stand up and say, no, it's not equal to a million other things that aren't equal to. It is unique, a man and a woman, the creation of new human life. And we as a society have an interest in making sure that new life is taken care of. Absolutely.
This is one of those issues that I find is underrepresented when it comes to the outspoken voice of the hierarchy of the church, bishops, USCCB, that kind of thing, defending marriage between a man and a woman. It's almost as if we have conceded this ground and we are just sort of letting it go wherever it goes. Do you see it that way, or do you find pockets within, say, the bishops that are defending traditional marriage?
I'm going to basically agree with you, but here's what I'm getting at. I guess I would say in the run-up to 2015, right? So from 2008 to 2015, as all these states across the country were debating whether or not they should enshrine in their constitution natural marriage between man and woman, and a lot of states voted on that stuff and approved it, right? And then 2015, the Supreme Court comes along and says, you know what, no, we're done with this. We're getting rid of it. And then so many people, not just bishops, but, Catholics, everyone across the country said, I think we lost. The thing is, when Roe v. Wade happened, we didn't just say, I guess we lost, whatever. We walk away from the battlefield. We're done. It's like, wait a minute. We said, this is totally wrong. We have to fight this. And Nellie Grace, I loved her because a year after that, she's like, I'm going to do a march. We got to do something to keep this going, to let people know about this truth. And it took 49 years to put the toothpaste back in the bottle, right? I think the initial reaction to the marriage defeat was, I guess it's settled. Nothing's settled. There is nothing. There's no permanent victories on this side of, heaven. You got to keep fighting. Yeah. And if you lose, you take a step back, count your blessings, look at over things, and devise strategy, and then move forward.
I think at the very least we could say we must prioritize giving children what they deserve, which is a mom and a dad and a stable relationship with which they can grow. That becomes a greater priority than being sympathetic to people who are struggling in, same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria or anything else. We can be sympathetic and care and want to help those people, but not at the expense of children. And it doesn't make
Perfectly
sense.
Said.
All right, so we're running out of time here. They can go to your website and they can contact their senators to try to have some influence on how this gets voted for.
Absolutely. Go to CatholicVote.org and you can contact your senators. And, never count anything out. We can fight on this. We can win on this. And let's, press forward.
All right. Praise be to God. Joshua Mercer from CatholicVote.org. We're grateful for your time today, sir. God bless you. God love you. Have a good one.
Thank you, sir.
All right. If you can join us in the next hour, Attorney Brent Haynes is going to be on talk about federal judge blocking the Biden administration's guidance allowing biological males in girls' school bathrooms. That's kind of a win. So it's some good news. Praise be to God. Brent Haynes will tell us all about that and the implications of it. Otherwise, we'll see you back here tomorrow morning for another round of Catholic Drive Time, keeping you informed and inspired. God bless you. God love you. Share us with a friend. We'll be right back.